$1.1 billion. That's how much vanished from American public media in a single congressional vote. And the worst part? Most Americans didn't even notice until it was already gone. Yesterday, a federal judge slammed his gavel and declared Trump's order to defund NPR and PBS unconstitutional. Headlines everywhere called it a victory for free speech. But here's what those headlines won't tell you. The money is already gone. The agency that distributed it has been dissolved. That ruling? It's a receipt for a house that already burned to the ground. This isn't just a story about two media organizations losing funding. This is about the systematic creation of an information vacuum across America. And who stands to profit from filling it? Over the next 12 minutes, we're going to trace the money, expose the strategy, and show you exactly how this affects the price you pay for truth every single day. The most shocking part of this story? It comes at the very end, and it has nothing to do with politics. Stay with me. To understand what we lost, you need to understand what public media actually was. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting was created in 1967 under Lyndon Johnson. The idea was radical for its time. Media funded by the people, for the people, free from advertiser pressure and political manipulation. By 2024, NPR reached roughly 57 million listeners weekly. PBS was available in 98% of American homes. Together, they operated over 1,500 local stations, many in rural areas where commercial media simply refused to go because there was no profit in it. Think about that. 1,500 stations. In towns where the nearest newspaper had already shut down, where broadband internet was still a dream, public radio was the last thread connecting communities to verified information. That was the ecosystem. Fragile, underfunded, but functioning. And it was about to be dismantled piece by piece. Let me introduce you to Jay. Jay lives in Morgantown, West Virginia. Population about 30,000. Jay drives 35 minutes to his warehouse job every morning, and every morning he tuned into his local NPR affiliate. Not because he was political, because it was the only station that told him when the bridge on Route 19 was closed, when the chemical plant upstream had a spill, when school was canceled. His property taxes partly funded that station. About 15 cents a day? Less than a single gas station coffee. For that 15 cents? Jay got local news, emergency alerts, children's programming for his kids, and investigative journalism that once exposed contaminated water in 3 West Virginia counties. Nationally, the numbers were just as remarkable. The total federal investment in public broadcasting was approximately $445 million annually through CPB, split across 330 million Americans. That's roughly $1.35 per person per year. For context, the Pentagon spends that same amount in about 47 minutes. But here's what made public media irreplaceable. It wasn't just cheap. It was independent. No pharmaceutical company could pull ads to kill a story. No billionaire owner could spike an investigation. That independence made it a target. And the people who wanted it gone had been planning for decades. The truly unsettling part? The attack didn't start with Trump. He just finished the job. But here's where everything unraveled. In May 2025, President Trump signed an executive order directing the termination of federal funding to NPR and PBS. The stated reason: alleged left-wing bias. The order cited specific NPR coverage the administration deemed unfavorable. Now, defunding public media wasn't new rhetoric. Conservative lawmakers had proposed it for years. But previous attempts always died in Congress. This time was different. This time, Congress cooperated. By summer 2025, lawmakers passed a rescission package that stripped $1.1 billion from public broadcasting allocations. That wasn't just NPR and PBS's annual share. That included forward-funded commitments, money already promised to local stations for the next 2 fiscal years. Imagine your employer not just firing you, but clawing back your last 2 years of salary. That's what happened. Then came the final blow. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the independent nonprofit that had distributed federal funds to local stations since 1967, was dissolved, not defunded. Dissolved, 58 years of institutional infrastructure, gone. The speed was breathtaking. From executive order to institutional death in roughly 4 months. Local stations started going dark by fall 2025. Rural affiliates went first because they depended most heavily on federal dollars. Some stations in Alaska, Appalachia, and the rural Midwest lost 40 to 60% of their operating budgets overnight. Jay noticed when his morning drive went silent. No more traffic updates. No more school closings. No more water quality reports. Just static. And here's the part that should make your blood run cold. The court ruling that came down on March 31st, 2026. The one calling this unconstitutional? Judge Randolph Moss explicitly found that the executive order constituted viewpoint discrimination, a direct violation of the First Amendment. The government punished a media organization for its editorial perspective. The court confirmed it, but the ruling can only block future executive action. It cannot resurrect a dissolved agency. It cannot restore rescinded congressional appropriations. The judge handed down justice, but justice arrived to an empty room. Now here's where this story takes a turn most people aren't talking about. When public media dies, something else grows in its place. And it's not nothing, it's worse than nothing. Media researchers call it the information vacuum effect. When a trusted local news source disappears, residents don't simply consume less news. They migrate to unvetted sources. A 2024 Duke University study found that in counties that lost their local newspaper, misinformation sharing on social media increased by 42%. 42%. Now apply that to 1,500 public radio and TV stations serving communities where they were often the last credible outlet standing. Think of it like removing a dam from a river. The water doesn't stop flowing. It just floods everywhere, uncontrolled, destroying everything in its path. But here's the truly terrifying part, and I promised I'd reveal this. The vacuum isn't accidental. It's profitable. When NPR and PBS retreat, commercial media doesn't rush in to serve those communities. There's no money in covering city council meetings in rural Montana. Instead, national cable networks and algorithm-driven platforms absorb those audiences, and those platforms don't optimize for accuracy. They optimize for engagement. Outrage gets clicks. Fear gets shares. Conspiracy gets watch time. The business model is simple. The angrier you are, the more money they make. Since 2005, local news deserts across America have expanded by roughly 30%. Over 2,500 newspapers have closed. Now, add public broadcasting to that casualty list. Jay used to get his information from a station accountable to his community. Now his information comes from an algorithm accountable to shareholders. His news feed doesn't tell him about the chemical spill upstream anymore. It tells him who to blame for it before anyone even confirms it happened. And the companies filling this vacuum? They're not small players. We're talking about platforms generating hundreds of billions in annual advertising revenue. Every local station that goes dark is a new market for them. Every confused citizen is a new pair of eyes to monetize. This isn't a media crisis. It's a market opportunity disguised as a political battle. The biggest winners in the war on public media aren't politicians. They're the corporations that sell you outrage for profit. So what does this mean for you specifically? Let's talk dollars. If you have children, PBS provided free educational programming that studies valued at roughly $3,500 per child per year in equivalent tutoring. That's gone if you live in a flood zone, tornado alley, or wildfire region. Public Broadcasting's emergency alert system integration was your lifeline. Many rural stations carried real-time disaster updates when cell towers went down. That infrastructure is degrading. If you're a taxpayer, here's the bitter math. You were paying $1.35 a year for public media. Now that money is simply gone from the budget. You didn't get a tax cut. The savings were redirected, not returned. And the replacement? You'll pay with your attention instead. The average American now spends 58 minutes per day on algorithm-curated news feeds. Those platforms harvest your data, sell your attention to advertisers, and feed you content designed to keep you scrolling. Not informed. Jay calculated it one night. He used to spend $0 on news. His taxes covered public radio. Now he's considering a $13 monthly subscription to a digital news service just to get reliable local weather. And traffic. That's $156 a year. His cost of staying informed just jumped 11,500%. And he's one of the lucky ones who can afford it. What about the millions who can't? What happens to a democracy when only people who can pay get access to reliable information? That's not a hypothetical question anymore. We're living in it right now. What if Congress had maintained CPB funding at even half its previous level, around $225 million? Independent projections suggest roughly 800 local stations could have survived. 800 communities that would still have a local voice. Instead, we chose to save each American 67 cents a year and lost an entire information infrastructure. In 1787, Thomas Jefferson wrote, and I quote, "Were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate to prefer the latter." He understood something fundamental. Democracy doesn't die in darkness. It dies in noise, when there's so much information that none of it can be trusted. When every source has an agenda you can see, the result isn't freedom, it's paralysis. The defunding of NPR and PBS will be remembered not as a political victory or defeat, but as the moment America decided that public knowledge was a luxury, not a necessity. The court said it was unconstitutional. History will say it was irreversible. The question isn't whether public media is coming back. It's not. The question is, who controls what replaces it? And are you comfortable with that answer? If this story made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. We're following the money on every story the algorithm doesn't want you to see. The fight for truth doesn't end here. It starts with you pressing that button.